Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Jeremy B. Hill Show. All right, hello, my friends. Welcome to another show. Today, I'm excited to actually have a good friend of mine, Justin Nassiri, CEO Executive Presence. We've known each other for a couple of years. We have threatened each other with doing more cool stuff together. I have loved what it is that you're doing and building and being a very, 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 very small part of it. But Justin, my man, welcome to the show.
So good to be here, Jeremy. You're in the category of people from moment one that I met you, and we work with a lot of different people, but I was like, this is a man I want to learn from and get to know and, consider you a mentor and friend and honored to be on the show today.
Well, dude, very kind. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, when you have those little moments to where it is that you start kind of pulling the string back on things and you're like, wow, like Justin Timberlake can sing, he can dance, and he can act. Like, now I really hate him, right? So I started kind of pulling the string on, well, dude, like I know Justin pretty well, but then I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. 3-time founder, former #1 rated podcast host, a published author, a graduate of the Naval Academy, a trained nuclear engineer, just cuz, a Stanford MBA who was recently nominated to the Forbes Business Council. Dude, you are so much cooler than I thought. I had no idea. Damn, man. What an extraordinary kind of collection of experiences. Like I knew that there was something more to you, and now that it makes tons of sense. My man, dude, that's amazing.
It's always better on the outside. I think my felt experience was I have founded 2 companies and sold 2 companies, but they were really failures. I raised a bunch of money for the first one and it didn't pan out the way that I wanted and had a very small exit that wasn't really meaningful. And the second company was bootstrapped and led to what I'm doing right now, which is why I sold it. So very grateful for that.
Okay.
But my experience was a decade of wandering the entrepreneurial wilderness, wondering like, should I be doing this? Do I have a path? Like, do I have anything to contribute here? Am I wasting my time? And so like any story, like the chapter we're in right now, I feel great and it feels vindicating for those 10 years. And it feels like a lot of what I was learning at the time is being put to good use. But by no means was it, this rocket ship from the start, lots of ups and downs and a lot of self-doubt along the way. And mainly just sharing that for anyone who's listening who doesn't feel like they have that clear direction, or they don't feel like they're in the chapter that is going to be a page turner for the readers. It's never a straightforward journey, and there's always these crucible moments where you don't know what things are going to be on the other side. And so grateful for the history I've had, but along the way, there's been a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, it's that meme that every entrepreneur has seen is what it looks like from the outside, and then what it looks from the and it's it is that thing of, if you would have known what would have been demanded of you to do this, at the start, would you have done it? And for most people, it's like, God, you just get up and kind of swing the bat and fight the fight a little bit every day and hope to get a little bit further.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why authenticity matters so much to me, and an approach of build in public, which is like, I think there were times in my career where I would have thrown in the entrepreneurial towel because I didn't realize the reality, and I just kind of bought into the glossy post-mortem that we see most often, where people either misrepresent or misremember how things actually went.
Yeah.
But when I see other people building in public and you see the windfalls and the losses and the tragedy and all of it mixed together, I think it's a great gesture to future entrepreneurs of showing them what it's actually like, rather than like, hey, I made it out on the other side, let me write my memoirs where I know where it ended up, rather than the reality where you're in the meat grinder and you just don't know where things are going to end up at the end of it.
Yeah. So like, I want to go through a little bit more of your background, but your background and where it is that you come from. Like, I wouldn't pick the entrepreneurial bent. I would pick Big Four consulting, something to that degree. Did you grow up in a family of entrepreneurs or small businesses, or how did this, tell me a little bit about the Justin of old or the Justin of young?
Yeah, grew up Southern California. My mom was a bookkeeper at a school. My dad was a CFO for a like a franchise of office cleaners. And I do remember in high school reading an article. I graduated high school in '98, so reading an article about the dot-com craze and people at Stanford Business School dropping out to kind of pursue these startups.
Sure.
But that was kind of like the only thing that I knew about startups. And I went to school at the Naval Academy, and so my next 5 years were kind of predicted, right? I went on to be on submarines, but I knew I'd have 5 years of service to kind of think things out. And during those 5 years, the only kind of role model I had is I knew a couple friends that would end their service and go to business school and then do consulting. And so that was kind of one path that I saw play out. And I didn't know much about it other than like, let me go to business school, get my bearings, and let me go on to consulting and kind of get my bearings even further. And when I applied to Stanford, that was my essay. I was like, that was literally the plan. And I did my summer internship in New York at McKinsey, and I accepted my offer there. And that was my plan. And what happened to me was it was 2009 when I graduated. The economy kind of tanked, and my start date with McKinsey was pushed to March of the year after I graduated. And I went with a good friend who went to the Air Force Academy and another friend, both of them from business school. We flew, we graduated, we flew to Alaska, we flew into the wilderness, hiked for 2 weeks. It was amazing.
Wow.
And one of these conversations on those hikes was my friend John said, Justin, if you take your signing bonus from McKinsey and you take 9 months to try and start a company, and all you get out of it is a story you tell over a beer, it's worth it. And that kind of was the nudge for whatever reason I needed, where I took those 9 months and I started a company and got to the point where I didn't know they would pan out, but I was just loving that life. And I wrote to McKinsey, and at the time, because of my Navy background, it felt so much like I was impugning my honor, where I was like, hey, I know I committed to coming to you guys, but I've fallen in love with this. I don't know if it'll work out, but I would rather see this through. And they were like, thank you for letting us know. You've got 30 days to pay back your bonus. And so it was a lot of hardship, but a couple weeks later, I got my first round of funding and kind of went down that path. But long way of saying I never thought about this as a career for me. In hindsight, I can see the dotted lines of where, as a kid, I wanted to be an inventor. And as a kid, I would like do a lot of things that were entrepreneurial, but I never self-identified in that way. I never had this thought of like, I have to do this or nothing else. Like I was going to do consulting, which is the far extreme opposite of it. And I like to tell that as well for people that like, I think that the popular story is like entrepreneurs are born, not made. And I'm like,
I was just going to ask
fuck
that.
all of that. Like, just anyone can do this. Like, anyone who would listen to that should not be an entrepreneur. Like, if someone's going to tell you, if this is a club of members and not members, like, screw that. Like, anyone can do this. And in the work I've done with executive presence, I've seen every variety. I've seen the person where I cannot imagine them doing anything else. And I've seen the person where it's like, oh, it's hard to imagine you being an entrepreneur. And it's like, there's no rules. There's no, you can or can't do this. It's like, I feel like anyone could potentially choose this path, and don't let people rule it out for you.
Yeah. Well, so we go through we go through part of that story leading to your first kind of entrepreneurial bent, but I don't think that there's enough credit given here for the fact that like the Naval Academy doesn't accept every schlub that's out there, right? So I mean, there is a kind of a consistent pattern of excellence in almost everything it is that you're doing well before executive
Thank you.
presence now, right? And so Naval Academy, I can only assume I don't have friends that have gone through Naval Academy. Know several that have gone through West Point, but basically peers, one and the same, right?
It's
Uh,
like the Naval Academy, just a lot easier. Yeah. Yeah.
nice for all the West Point grads. I'll give you
Yeah.
Justin's home address and phone number. Just kidding.
Yeah.
But Naval Academy then to serving and training on submarines and spending 5 years to Stanford Business School, like a lot of this stuff, kind of rolls off your tongue because you've told this story before and it's a part of your story, but you don't maybe recognize the gravity of this kind of
Mm.
consistent performance and kind of personal commitment to success. Do you think that has that been a trend for you, like forever, like as a kid in sports and high school and college and everything, is just that kind of um, just that high personal standard of
Mm.
excellence? Like I'm seeing that theme across everything here. Was that
Yeah.
important to you growing up? Where did that come from?
I, it's funny because my brother's, my brother was a Rhodes Scholar and went to Harvard Medical School. He's been very
Oh God, what
successful in
did
his
your
own right.
parents feed you?
Well, I just met up with him and we were kind of hashing this out, and I'm like, I think our parents kind of got two kids that were very self-motivated. And they, what I think that they did best was like their environment was like, we don't care what you do, we love you. And it was like very loving and accepting and no pressure at all. I think it's interesting because I think my brother was like much more, like, 1600 and straight A's and all of those things. I think that my motivation was never like, I don't think I was ever paying attention to grades or anything like that. I think it was much more of like, I got one ride on this planet. I want to get the most out of it, and
Yeah.
just kind of like it felt more like a representation of who I was, which was like if I didn't do sports, I did band, but if I was in band, I was going to be the drum major because I
Sure.
wanted to like be,
Yeah.
wanted to like get the most value, I guess. And so it's funny because when I put myself in comparison to a lot of my peers at like Stanford and all these places, like I feel sometimes like an anomaly where I didn't have the best grades at the Naval Academy and I wasn't like the rock star athlete. I just kind of feel like I made my own way, but enjoyed it and had an impact. And yeah, so grateful for all of that.
That's fabulous. Okay, so um, Naval Academy to serving to MBA to McKinsey. So they've made you an offer. Candidly, Big Four consulting, what most people coming out of
Yeah.
B school are looking for. You get a signing bonus, but a delay. Your buddy in the woods says, "Dude, I got
Yeah.
a great idea. Here's what we're gonna do." Which love
Yep.
it, love that idea. So now you've started something. Now McKinsey comes back and says you got 30 days to pay back the advance that we gave
Yep.
you, that I'm sure you used to go hiking and to fund the
Yeah.
startup. And so it's
Yep.
now like, oh shit, this is real. Okay, so what was the first business that you started?
So it was initially called the One About, which was designed to capture life stories. Like the mission was like I wanted my future children and grandchildren children to know my parents and grandparents. And
Hmm.
so it was kind of a predecessor to Facebook timeline, but the sense of like how do we allow us to kind of capture these memories. And one of the pieces that broke off from that was that video was a really effective way to capture stories. And so it kind of morphed into a company called Video Genie, which was trying to capture video stories. And the primary outlet for that was holidays and birthdays and things like that, grouping together messages. But I remember I kind of knew when I wrote the business plan, I'm like, there's a consumer application and a business application. We'll get to the business application, in a
Mhm.
couple of years. And I was just doing some, due diligence on that idea. And I got connected to someone from Match.com. And they were like, the phone call was literally, she's like, hey, we have a tremendous need for video testimonials. And, we would spend millions of dollars on this if you had a solution. And I like hung up the phone. It was me and a CTO at the time. And I'm like, dude, the consumer piece is dead. Like there is a lot here on the business side. So Video Genie was all about video testimonials for companies. And then that morphed into it became Storybox because the bigger opportunity was on Instagram and kind of collecting
Yeah.
photos that people were already sharing that were applied to product detail pages. So lots of pivots along the way. The
Yeah.
last one I made way too late and kind of missed out to an incumbent, and
Mhm.
happy to kind of dissect all of that.
Yeah.
But it was really in the space of authentic marketing, of using real people to share stories on behalf of a brand.
Now, was this so your first deal you raised money for? I read. Now, you didn't raise money from like, some schlep and everything else. You raised money from who? Some guy?
Eric Schmidt, yeah, from
Eric Schmidt.
Google.
So like
Yep.
the CEO of Google,
Yep.
because that's just what you do if you went to the Naval Academy and have an MBA, and
Yeah.
um, how did are you guys just like tennis buddies or something, or how
It
did
was
that come together?
so much luck where
Yeah.
a classmate of mine from business school reached out and he's like, "Hey, I heard what you're working on. Come, let's catch up." And I was just going in to catch up. And he's like, "Hey, I just started working for Eric Schmidt and I started a personal fund for him. And I heard about what you're doing." And like, they decided to invest. But it's so much serendipity because, like, one, I mean, that's one of the reasons you go to business school is you instantly create a very powerful network. And so I was very lucky in that I was in this small group of people and I knew this guy.
Mhm.
And then I was also very lucky in the timing that I think he was in one of Eric's classes at business school and got to know him and started this fund. But like, I think a couple of years in, he probably never would have invested as he got better at picking
Yeah.
ideas. I probably wouldn't have measured up. So again, a lot of these stories are serendipity where I happen to
Yeah.
know this guy. He happened to raise that fund. He happened to know what I was
Mhm.
doing. But I also feel like that's part of entrepreneurship is like simultaneously, I was emailing hundreds and hundreds of people to see about raising. So I was like going after it. It
Yeah.
wasn't like it just fell in my lap. Like I was in the process of thinking about how to position this and had another investor lined up. So it worked out well. But it does kind of make me think about entrepreneurship as that intersection between luck and luck and hard work. I
Yeah.
like the phrase, the harder I work, the luckier I am. And I really felt lucky that this worked. And amidst it, I was working nonstop to like
Yeah.
have a pitch in place so that when that meeting happened, I wasn't really shuffling. Like I kind of knew how to tell the story in a compelling way. So it really was that mix of hard work and luck.
Good for you. Now you ran that first deal for several years and then ultimately sold it, or what happened with that one?
I did. I think my biggest takeaway from my first startup was to quit early. And
Uh,
I held on to that thing for
sell before
seven.
you have to, or
Yeah, it was,
yeah.
I held on to it for 7 years and it was kind of like, I was just trying in every way to make it work. And
Mhm.
if I were the smarter founder, I think I would have given it the old college try for 3 years. And when I realized that the opportunity wasn't there to make it into something big, I would have either shut down or sold. And I think our investors would have been fine with that. I think I felt so much pressure from having taken money from people that I just, I devoted twice as long of my life as I should have. And if I'm kind of rear view mirroring this, I'm like, man, I could have shut it down and gone to another startup and learned or tried something earlier. And it really feels like, I hate the phrase, but it's like, don't spend 2 years getting the years of experience. It's like,
Yeah.
I felt like I spent 7 years there getting 3 years of experience. And it was, maybe there's a theme here. I felt a misplaced sense of obligation to McKinsey about reneging, and
Sure.
I felt misplaced obligation to my investors of like
Investors.
I have to make this keep going, and like in the end, the return made no difference to them, but the bigger cost was years of my life where I could have been learning more either with someone else or on something else.
Dude, it's for those of you listening, you have no idea how valuable that last 2 minutes is. Like we really do. There's some, and we run through this because I mean, our business, right? We manage funds, and you have this obligation. It is to feel like it is that you got to stick it out, or you got to make decisions, or you got to do something one or the other. It is that because of just some self-imposed burden that you put on yourself or whatever it is. And again, like you said, man, I'm taking 7 years to get 3 years of experience, or I'm
Yep.
taking 2 hours to cook minute rice. Like
Yeah.
there's just something here. It is that, so making those decisions faster
Yeah.
and get to the end of the movie faster, get there faster.
Yep.
Dude, that really resonates and speaks to me when
And,
you say
and that, that applies everywhere. I'll tell you one difference between my company now and my first company is, no matter what, you're going to have people who aren't a fit for the company. And that's
that.
nothing about them or the company. It's just not a fit.
Just
And
employees wise.
employees, yep.
Okay.
And my first company, I bent over backwards to make impossible situations work. And the third company, my current company, I mean, I can tell you stories of like realizing on a Wednesday, like realizing, you know what, this is not a good fit, and a Friday moving towards it. And just, I feel like if there's one super skill that I'm learning in entrepreneurship, it is to like act quickly. And I think that that applies just as much to shutting down the company and moving on, or terminating an employment, or cutting off a product line or a service line. And I respect, I listened to a podcast forever ago with Richard Branson, and I think I took that away from his interview where he was talking about whatever his version of Coca-Cola was. I forget what it was,
Right.
but he was like, he just talked about, he's like, I'll go all in an idea, but like my team made the business case that this was no longer a good business, and I shut it down the next day. And it was like, he put in so much resources in his personality to realize that someone at his level was willing to admit when they made a mistake and then not propagate it further. I think it's a
Right.
superpower, because you
Yeah.
pour so much time and energy into a company or into a team, but ultimately realizing, let's say in the employee case, like this is not good for them either. If I'm holding on to them and it's not a good fit for them, how is that really serving them either?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. I think we do that when it's time to end something. We also do something similar when it's time to start something, right?
Yeah.
You can have decision constipation. Oh, God, I got to let this person go, or I got to shut this down, or I got to get rid of
Yep.
that customer. I got to, whatever it is, and you wait and you wait and you wait and wait and wait. Well, it's also the same thing for starting,
Yeah.
right? I gotta be more prepared. I gotta raise more money. I have to sharpen my pencil or get my
Oh
business
my
plan,
God.
whatever it is, and you
Yeah.
just kind of avoid that starting, just like you can avoid stopping something. And there's so much to just make
Yeah.
a decision and get on. Yeah,
Well, not to complicate the
yeah,
discussion, but something I think about a lot right now is you know my COO Aaron.
sure.
Um, One of my skills as an entrepreneur is I am a really, like, it's called quick start. I am a really big quick start. I could have a conversation right now for an idea and I could be selling it tomorrow. Like, I'm very quick at moving. And at the stage that we were at as a company, that has become a liability. And we're literally introducing friction intentionally with my COO, of realizing that that ability to make a decision quickly when I have a team, it starts to create whiplash where every day it's a new focus. And so we're having to grow up as an organization and have things where we think further ahead. And I'm not able to pivot on a dime like I once was. And we're intentionally introducing more structure so that when I have an idea, I'm not jerking around everyone, but I have space to talk about it with my leadership team without derailing what they're doing. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of interesting thinking over the life of an entrepreneur, like the ability to start, the ability to stop, but also the ability to slow down, and like the value of not moving as quickly as you're
Yeah,
used to. Or even, I get that adrenaline high of like, it's a
sure.
superpower to bring something to life, but
Yeah.
now it's one of our biggest liabilities as a company.
Well, as you get bigger, you start to recognize the value in slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Oh
Right.
man, yeah, that lands really well right now.
Yeah. So the first two deals. So you raised outside money for the first company. Did
Yep.
you raise outside money for the second company?
I didn't. I kind of probably did a typical entrepreneur thing, which is
Yeah.
the second one. I was like, I do not want a team. I do not want employees. I do not want investors. Like, that was the second company, was the pendulum swinging. And I
Okay.
started the company. It was called
Mhm.
Captivate.ai. And the premise was, companies do long form content like podcasts and webinars. They get a fraction of the value. Let's take that content, slice it up for YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn,
Sure.
Facebook. Let's get them more value out of their long form content.
Hmm.
And so I bootstrapped that. I built an army of contractors. And if I did one thing well there, I kind of, I like, there's a quote from Herman Wouk, who wrote The Cane Mutiny. And he said,
Hmm.
the Navy is a system designed by geniuses to be run by idiots. And I kind of feel like that's what I approached. Is I had
Yeah.
30 different contractors. I could switch any of them out at any time, and they were kind of making this business run for me.
Mm.
And so I kind of felt like that was, maybe in retrospect, that was my entrepreneurial recovery phase, where everything I didn't like on the first startup, I did the opposite
Yeah.
there. And that allowed me, with executive presence, to land more in the middle, where I have a team of full-time employees and a few contractors, but I kind of came back to the starting point of like, I actually
Mhm.
like having a team, and it
Yeah.
was bootstrapped versus funded, but like, it kind of feels like I was able to get more data points on the opposite of my first company and kind of take the best from both of them to kind of
Yeah.
feed into what
To
I'm
start
doing now.
EP. Yeah.
Yep.
So version one is raising money, having shareholders, having guilt on how to
Yeah.
deal with them, right?
Yeah.
And guilt, responsibility, advice, and counsel, hopefully along the way, to going the right, taking 7 years to do something you should have done in three,
Yeah.
to going the opposite direction. It sounds like almost strategic solopreneur, not
Yeah.
raising outside money, leveraging Tim Ferriss 4 hour work week, contractors, and managing that to you successfully came out of that one as well, right?
Yeah. I did. I sold that for, I mean, I can even probably think of the number. I think I sold it for like 300,000 or $350,000. And which for the time I put into it was great. I paid
Sure.
myself along the way, but I kind of, executive presence was the splinter of
Yeah.
Captivate. It was like, okay, doing every social media channel is too much, but LinkedIn seems like the best of all of them. And doing something from a brand is okay, but doing it from an individual is much more powerful. And
Yeah.
so LinkedIn for executives became the product that I was testing. And I
Mhm.
literally I sent in mails to every CEO I knew, and I presented it as vaporware. This is what I'm doing. And I got like 40K of monthly recurring revenue. And that was enough just to like
For
realize like
Captivate or for EP?
for EP. Yeah.
Dude,
It
this is
was,
at inception. This is like I'm
yeah.
going to sell something and
Yeah,
then
it
build
was
it.
literally December 15th. I messaged a bunch of people. January, I had clients, and it had grown so quickly compared to Captivate that I was like, bought a separate URL
Yeah.
and realized it was a separate company. And took me 4 or 5 months to sell Captivate, but it was like that quick of burn the bridges, go
Wow.
all in. And I think it's because I had spent over a decade pushing the boulder up the hill that when I experienced for the first time in my career product market fit, it was like, oh my God, you can have wind
This
blowing in
is what
your,
it's supposed to feel like.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
right?
still not easy, but
Yeah.
I told my long-term advisors, I'm like, look, had I experienced product market fit a decade ago, I would have shut down all of the companies much sooner. Like, I think there's an advantage to joining a startup that has that, because you start to realize, like, wow, when there's demand for something, it's still hard, but it's a lot easier. And I think that pattern recognition is really helpful of knowing when you've got a good idea versus an okay idea that's not going to get you there.
The awesome thing it is that is speaking to me that I'm competent, and if the audience isn't getting this, they should, is the fact of, um, it took you one or two deals it is to get through to
Yep.
get to the point to where you go, okay, this is now I've found the rhythm. But it was
Yeah.
the experience from this and the experience from this and the goods and the bads from each of these things that kind of shape perspective that allow you to be smarter going forward for what it is that you're doing.
100%. And I'll tell you, with my first company, Video Genie slash Storybox, I sold a $5,000 a month deal to Dyson, the vacuum cleaner.
Sure.
And we worked with them 4 years. They paid us 5 grand a month without fail, and they never used us. And I think what I took away from the, and we were reaching out every week, and it was just bureaucracy, and it never went anywhere. But I mean, that stayed with me where, when I start my first pricing point for executive presence with 5 grand a month. And it was like, it was just kind of like realizing, for me, it's a lot easier to deal with fewer clients at a higher price point. I was bought in right away on subscription revenue. And I was just at an event with a bunch of like-minded companies, and a lot of them are trying to get over to more subscription revenue. And I'm like, man, I started there day one because I knew that from Storybox. And so, even though I have regrets on the decade preceding executive presence, there were so many little
Yeah.
tiny things that I picked up along the way where I'm like, I'm grateful for that. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was getting some pattern recognition, and I was learning these little skills that have really paid out on executive presence.
I think the thing too is there's only so many things it is that you can read about in books. Nothing
Yeah.
can take the place of experience. And
Yes.
you can read about doing push-ups all you want. I can
Yeah.
read about, anything, all it is that I want, but ultimately the practice of building and engaging and winning and failing and getting kicked in the teeth and having to report to it, like there's only so much of that you can learn about, podcast about, read about, otherwise that you have to be in it. And like you said,
100%.
that's how it is that you're gaining this perspective. It is
And I
this
would
go, yeah.
I would add to that too, and I think it's built on the experience, but learning from others. And I'm a
Mhm.
part of so many different CEO groups, but I was in Dallas for a meetup of one of these CEO groups, and when I'm in an environment like that,
Yeah,
it's like every conversation is like, what can I learn from this person? And I realize that someone's doing sales really well, and I just go deep down the rabbit hole of asking them questions of what they're doing, because my approach is like I steal everything I possibly
sure.
can if someone's
Yeah,
doing it better than me. And I think I've got a sense for what is a good idea or a bad idea just from having failed so much. But everyone there, I'm like, oh, this is a person I can learn about equity from. And I'll
sure.
just drill them with questions, and I'm getting 18 months of their own failure to save me that so I can start in the right spot. And I just feel like that's such a anytime you meet with another entrepreneur who is hungry, it's so valuable just to kind of learn what they're doing that you can steal from them.
Yeah, and it's putting yourselves in rooms to where it is that you can learn, because it's that, every day I realize how much I don't know, right?
Yeah,
Because I'm around people like you, and I'm around other
100%.
leaders. It is just like you said, to where I want to be
Yep,
in that room not only to learn but to gather perspective. It is
100%.
from people that are looking at things, seeing things, doing things a little bit different, that I can hopefully, like you said, steal that, absorb that, try to figure out a way to implement that into what I'm doing. Yeah,
100%.
love.
Yeah.
The other piece it is when you started EP, it is that I love is so many of these people it is have ideas,
Yeah.
and they raise money and they put it in, and they've got 27 versions of a pitch deck that never fucking do anything, whatever it
Yep.
is. What they haven't done is actually talk to a fucking customer. They
Yeah.
actually haven't. And you're like, I don't know if this is going to be if you build it they will come. Why don't I get them to come, and then I'll figure out what to build.
Yeah.
And so, right, you going out saying, like you said, almost selling kind of vaporware to a certain degree. I've got this, here's what it is that we're going to do, let's message it out. And then
Yep.
that almost kind of overwhelming positive resonance of, oh my God, yes. You're like, okay, well, I guess I better go build something.
Yeah, it's so valuable. And I try to help out first time entrepreneurs. And one of the things that I usually see when I talk to them is they've spent so much time perfecting this website. And I'm like, man,
Yeah,
I was at over 2 million in recurring annual recurring revenue before I hired a company to build a website. And up until then, it was me on Squarespace spending 20 minutes building a website because the messaging changed so
sure.
quickly.
Yeah,
And everything is kind of like that of having an idea, piloting it, sketching it out. And it's kind of like, why build it out if there's no interest? And so that's where I rely on that quick start skill. Is it's kind of like I know if I throw something out and there's enough interest, I can move quickly to fill in the gaps. But there's so many times that I've thrown something out and it just fell flat. And I'm like, thank God I didn't
yeah.
polish the Titanic there, because that thing went
Totally.
down and that would have been such
Yeah.
a waste of time.
Polish the Titanic.
Yeah.
Solid. I totally like that.
Yeah.
So, so now let's dive a couple minutes
Yep.
into just EP. And so,
Yeah.
executive presence as you start, we're a customer.
Yep.
Absolutely love it. We've
Thank you.
been with you for a long time, and I
Yeah.
cannot speak highly enough.
Yeah.
Um, Value prop, just quick messaging. What does
Yeah.
executive presence do for leaders it is that are listening to this?
And for to be transparent here, this is I'll tell you where I'm at now, and this is
Yeah,
the 100th iteration of explaining what we do. But the way that I explain it right now is that we help companies build trust and awareness through executive thought leadership on LinkedIn. And I used to tell the story a lot of different ways, but essentially what we have realized is that on LinkedIn, the company page doesn't really matter, but the personal pages of an executive does. And so
yeah,
we work with that executive, whether it's a CEO or general partner or whatever they are, and we come up with a way to create their content, and look at the data. And the great thing about LinkedIn is the data can inform the content strategy.
yeah,
And so usually we're interviewing a client once a month, and that interview gets turned into really high performing content that ultimately helps them build trust and awareness for their company.
yeah. Perfectly said.
Thank you.
And so I think and I don't know if you've thought this, I think the original case study for the world of this is probably Gary Vaynerchuk. And so,
Yes,
right,
100%.
right. So,
Yep,
Gary and I have become friends over the last couple of years. And
yep,
so the, like his personal brand has become so prolific across everywhere,
yeah,
is that any of his kind of underlying interests, whether it's his wine brand or social brand or sports, any of this stuff it is that he's doing really gets a dramatic lift from his person, right? From his person. And that's in effect what it is that you're doing,
yep,
is kind of amplifying, um, amplifying that voice of those leaders for the things it is, their companies, their personal, whatever it is underneath them, it is that
yep,
they're doing. And so for me in our own results, and this is not an EP sales pitch,
yep.
um, but you guys have done extraordinary for us.
Thank
And,
you.
and it's one of the most important things in how it is that we're messaging and going to market has
Thank
been
you.
extraordinary. So I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
and I hope it's exciting for entrepreneurs because a personal brand is very nimble and a personal brand stays with you as long as you're alive. And so I feel like, 20 years ago, you build up a company and you move on and you might not be known from that. But if it's almost like the strategy is flipped. You're building up your personal credibility, which benefits your current company and the next company and the next company and the next company. And so what a great through line for any entrepreneur to have that megaphone that you can utilize for the rest of your career.
That is perfectly said. That's perfectly said, because ultimately people are doing business with people, right? Regardless of the name on Justin's business card, I like
Yep.
Justin, whether
Yep.
he's an EP or whether he's selling sandwiches. Doesn't, right?
Yep.
Love that. So you're 3 years into the business now. Business is
Yeah.
growing, performing. I see your updates and you and I talk, and so I'm super excited about this
Thank you.
last 3 years. What does the next 2 years, 3 years look like
Yeah.
for you? Where are you guys going? What's on the horizon for 25?
It's funny because fortunately I've had a lot of smart people like Jeremy around me where my tendency is to go broad. And, ever since I started the company, I'm like, we should be on Twitter, we should be on TikTok and these other things. And I've realized the deeper we've gone with LinkedIn, the value of being really precise in what we do and how much further we have to go before expanding out. And so next year, I tell my team next year is boring. Next year is scaling for us. I feel like we're
Mhm.
finally at that spot where I've got 15 employees and I'm hiring for 6 right now. Like we've kind of 3 years in, we just hit 3 million in annual recurring revenue. We've got the formula on how to serve a client. And now it's just kind of like, I need more inventory. I need more people because the people are the product that we're selling.
Sure.
And so I'm excited about next year. I think we'll over double revenue in 1 year.
Exciting.
2025, the marching orders are pretty clear. And I think my team's excited because it's a lot more stability. I'm flying my leadership team out next week. We're sitting down and getting our OKRs done for the first
Mhm.
2 quarters. And it's just a lot more visibility, like going from week to week priorities to we move to quarters and now we're doing the first half of the year is just so much further thinking than
Okay.
we've ever been before. So 2025 is really the goal is to get us to 5 million in annual recurring revenue. And I started working with a group where in the 3 year horizon, like I think we'll hit the metrics within 3 years to have either M&A an option
Mhm.
or to kind of bring on funding from private equity, like either way. And
You make sure you let me invest before you do that. We'll talk
yes,
about that. We'll talk about that
100%.
offline. There you
You
go.
are first on the list for sure. Um, but I think what's nice for me is that the deeper I go, and this is my first time running a service business. I'm starting to learn like what the metrics are to measure. And so for the first time in my career, I'm looking at revenue per employee because for a
Mhm.
company like ours, that really matters. And for the first time, I'm starting to look at EBITDA. And that's kind of like the primary thing that I look at because I know that that's going to be my multiple for an exit. And I even, because I'm surrounded by so many people, I know, in my world, 300,000 per employee is good, 500,000 per employee is great. And so I have my benchmarks.
Right.
But the first 3 years being new in this world, I was operating under, software as a service metrics, which don't apply.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
it's just kind of like, I feel like pretty clear on what the next 3 years look like now.
Good for you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's do two more things before we go. So first, kind of lessons and leadership lessons on founder's journey.
Yep.
So, what do you think, in the first, year, two, three of people starting a business, regardless of what it is, from your experience, what do you think some of the biggest mistakes people make
Mm.
that's causing them to not grow or causing them more pain than they should? What are the mistakes that people just seem to make over and over and over again?
I think one is understanding whether or not they have product market fit, and that's a
Mm,
different motion. Like when you have that, it's more about growing, and until you have that, it's about conserving resources, both time and money,
yeah.
and iterating as quickly as possible. And I think what's that phrase with they ask someone the difference between pornography and art, and they're like, I can tell you if I see it. Like it's really hard to
Yeah.
know unless you're looking at it. And
Yeah.
it's like product market fit is really hard to know unless you're experiencing it.
Hmm.
But for me, I thought many times in my career that I had it, and I never had it until December of 3 years ago.
Wow.
And so I think that's the first one is like know which of those you're in, surround yourselves with people who can be brutally honest about whether or not you're there, and do not try to scale too early.
Yeah.
Um, I think the second piece, though, is that once you start to scale, you got to get out of the way. And one of my advisors, Bill Ustra, I'd met with him and I showed him what we were doing. We were at 80K in MRR. It was just me and contractors. And he said, okay, well, we've seen the limits of what Justin can do on his own. And at that point, I was boasting about what I had done as a one person company. Like, aren't I great? And he was looking at the numbers of like, you're never going to get bigger than this if you're the guy, if you're
Yeah.
the one who's doing everything. And that made me realize I had to get out of the way and hire people and give them authority. And that brought with it mistakes with mishiring and things like that. But it got me on the path of getting people better than me to do a role and getting out of the way and going from individual contributor to just what do you need? Like, how can I support you?
Yeah.
And that's a difficult gear to shift. It's like a still, 2+ years in, it's still a gear that I'm shifting of I jump in and I do things rather than delegate, and I try to move too quickly instead of empowering my team to feed me the information I need.
Mhm.
So that's, it's a lesson that I'm learning, but getting out of the way is the only reason that I'm here right now, because I would have been capped at 80K in MRR had I not found a team to build the systems, to build the machinery.
Yeah. So while you're growing, and you've been growing and are
Yeah.
growing, what are the one, two things it is that you're focused on constantly while you're growing?
Mm. Retention is a big one. It's like, um, I think that that's the number one metric of are we a good company?
Mm,
And I think you can get clients, but can you keep them? And so I'm always trying to, and I also, I hate the services that I kind of buy it and then I never see the CEO again. And
yeah.
so I'm trying to find scalable ways to like insert myself and make sure that people are happy and make sure that we're measuring those things. But I think retention is the biggest one. Um,
Yeah,
I
because you
think
fight so hard for revenue.
it is,
You
it
don't want to.
is.
You don't want to keep
Yes.
it, or I mean, you want to keep it. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially, we kind of have got a model where we can expand within. So like trying to see, can we actually grow revenue within a
Yeah.
client? I think that's the first one that I look at. Um, I think the other one is, obviously sales and revenue, but I'm starting to, take time to think further out of like, okay, what are the threats to us as a business?
Yeah.
And my first company, Video Genie, lost out a huge opportunity because I was so tied to video. I didn't see that Instagram was the up and comer and lost out a lot there.
Mhm.
I don't want to have that happen again. And so I'm purposely trying to set up the tripwires of like, okay, we're built on LinkedIn. Okay, let's be aware if there's a LinkedIn competitor we need to switch
Yeah.
to, or
Yeah.
we're tied to text. Let's be tied in if video starts to take over. And
Yeah.
so starting to like be the one adult in the room thinking further out of like, I know the next year is great, but are we anticipating the opportunities and risks that are further out that a few degrees of course correction now could
Mhm.
help us get around?
Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Last question on founder journey.
Yep.
You have built businesses raising money, and you built businesses self-funded.
Yep.
Um, Do you have a preference? And what would you recommend for guys that are listening to this that are on their startup journey or growth journey, either way?
Yeah, I don't fault people on I'm not one of those who will shit on investors. I think
Yeah.
that there's benefits both ways. I will tell you that for myself, when I raised money, it was the least efficient I've ever been as an entrepreneur because I didn't need to listen to what my clients were saying and I could build things that no one wanted. And I
Mm.
think that what I like about being bootstrapped is we are so close to the ground and we are paying attention when people churn or why they churn or why they don't like us or what we're not doing right because we have to be. That's keeping the lights on.
Yeah.
And so I really like what I'm doing right now, which is bootstrap to a stage. And I'll tell you that I feel the strain. Like my team is been in the red zone. Like we are in this operating model where I bring on clients and then my team is dying and we're way over capacity. And then we hire and they get to catch their breath and then they're back in the red zone soon. And while that sounds great, like I've got only so many of those cycles between before getting people burnt out, and then I have another problem.
Yeah.
And so, if I had capital, I could certainly hire in advance. But I'll also say, we've had some clients that prepaid for a year of service, and that's kind of given us money and doing things with line of credit. Like you can get really far being bootstrapped. But I know ultimately, we'll either sell and wrap up somewhere else, or we're going to have to bring in capital to kind of build to what I want this to be. And so maybe right now I view it as like, it's not a question of whether you raise or not. It's like, at what point do you raise? And
That's
I'm grateful for having gotten pretty far along without having to raise money.
love it,
Yeah.
dude. All right, a couple of fun
Yeah.
work. Okay, so two. How about this? This is one I ask myself a lot.
Yeah.
What keeps you up at night?
Mm.
Those times for me, I don't know about you, the times it is that are the loudest for me in my mind is when the world is the quietest.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
my wife and kids are asleep, and I've just got, back porch time with myself and just thinking and praying and letting my mind go and that kind of thing. So for you, what right now, what keeps you up at night?
It's mostly the things out of my control. And I think
Always,
that over
always.
the last 5 years, I've always been worried that the economy was about to go off a cliff, probably the last 7 years. And I'm still worried about that. And the latest iteration is just the change in countries' leadership, which no matter which way it swings, always brings disruption. But
Sure.
3 years ago it was COVID and that impact of that. And it's just kind of like there's always something, or the war in Israel. It's like there's
Yeah.
every 6 months there's something where I'm like, is this going to be the trigger that plunges our economy into a much overdue, recession? And being a marketing company, my head's first on the chopping block. So that's always a concern is like, I want to be running full out as long as I
Mm.
can, but I need to be quick to realize when, the economy changes so I can change quickly with it and not be put out of business.
Yeah.
I think that keeps me up at night. I think for a while, AI, like most people, it kept me up at night until I understood how to utilize it and how to make our business more efficient and realize the ways in which it's not an existential threat. That's
Mhm.
certainly one that has kept me up at night. Um, and I think key people, we're less, the more we grow, less I'm overly reliant on certain individuals. And there's, always going to be people on my team that I hope that I'm treating them well enough that they stick around with me for the duration. But I
Yeah.
wonder, do I lose someone for even unanticipated reasons?
Sure.
Like I had someone actually last week resign due to personal reasons, and it's a blow to lose someone that you love and care about. But fortunately, in this case, it's like it's one where we were able to switch things around without it being detrimental to the business. So
Yeah.
personnel, being a people-driven business, is also something that keeps me up.
Yeah. Okay. Like that's great. Well, everybody I've met on your team, I just adore you.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you.
people.
Thank you.
Um, what's one of a great piece of advice that somebody gave you?
Mm. Um, I think I'll give you two pieces of advice, both from the same person, Bill Ustra. That he gave me the first piece of advice, which is like, this is the extent, this is the
Yep.
upper ceiling on what you'll do as a one-man band. I think that was a great piece of advice. But he also told me maybe 6 months ago, he said that the CEO Justin today needs to take a note from CEO Justin from Video Genie, because
Mm.
you didn't know anything when you were CEO, and you were just really swinging for the fences because you didn't know any better. And he's like, I see you now as CEO Justin with all these scars on your face. You're a little bit more timid. You're a little bit less bluster. And he's like, I kind of wish you would learn those lessons from that old Justin that was like cocky and no reason to be cocky, but like just kind of pushing a little bit further
Yeah.
rather than being a little bit safe. And it's tough to do that. It's tough to
Mm.
come over those battle scars of,
Yeah.
having laid off people or sold to people and not delivered, or raised money and not made good. Like, it makes me more conservative. But I know he's right that I benefit from being willing to take more risks and not let those mistakes hold me back from kind of betting bigger on where we're at right now.
Dude, great.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite podcast or book
Mm.
that you like to recommend?
I will tell you I'll give you two on the books. One is the Circle. God, it is Rick Rubin's book. I want to say it's The Circle, but it's written for artists. It's written for musicians, and I just think it's spot on for entrepreneurs. I just
Okay.
think that entrepreneurs, like, we are creative beings, and so
Mhm.
like The Circle, and then Elizabeth Gilbert wrote Big Magic. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love, which I have not read, but she wrote Big Magic about the creative process, and I feel like both of those books I feel like are great, because I think that there are some entrepreneurs that are more business minded, and I think there's some entrepreneurs that are more creativity minded. And for those of you who are like, I kind of associate myself more with the latter. I do feel like our creativity is something we need to feed and protect, and that the day to day grind can sap that energy that we need to be thinking about ways to innovate. And so I think it's important to know about how to nurture our creativity and how to protect it, because it can get overrun once the business starts humming and it's just back to back meetings and no time to think and no time to build and no time to be creative.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right, last one.
Yeah.
So I understand that there is a cool story that you met George W. or sang
Yeah.
with George W. or
Yeah.
some kind of.
Yeah.
Tell me the George Bush story.
Yeah. So again, anti-typical Naval Academy grad, and that I was drum major in high school, and then at the
Okay.
Naval Academy, I did sailing for a little while, and then I switched over to the men's singing group there, the Glee Club. And the great thing about the Glee Club was, because we were so close to DC, and because we looked good in uniform, we got pulled into like so many amazing gigs where
Really? Okay.
yeah, I performed for George Sr., George Jr., Jimmy Carter, Clinton.
Oh,
Um, we sang for a lot of presidents, but my senior year, I was president of that group, and we sang at the opening of George Bush Sr.'s library. And they said, "Look, we're going to bring the director, the officer for the group, and then the president of the group, and you guys get a private audience with George and Martha for 15 minutes." And so yeah, it was great. We got 15 minutes to kind of, be with them and just chit chat. And, like many things when you're 21 years old, I totally took it for granted to meet with
sure.
someone who led the most powerful nation in the world and what that must take. But I think what I liked about that is that, you said kind of like you want to be in the room with people who make you
Yeah.
better. I think, on an energetic level, it was just soaking in, like being in the room with one of the biggest heavy hitters in the history of the world, and to be
Mm,
like, wow, I've been in that room once. I can probably be in it again. It's
mm,
not ruling it out. And so I've got that picture of me and him, side by side. And I think it's that reminder to me of like, don't count yourself out. I
yeah.
think, you can be in the room with these people. Like, there's nothing special about them, just like there's nothing special about
Mm,
me. They're just really smart, driven people and had some luck. And, I'm not going to count myself out of being around people like that more.
dude, that's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Um, thank you for today. I really
Thank you,
appreciate
man.
it.
Any chance I get to chat with you is just a gift.
I love it. All
Yeah.
right, so leave us with this. So,
Yep.
executive presence, I'm super excited about what
Thank
you're
you.
doing. I know that
Yep.
you have only just begun to scratch of the surface.
Thank you.
But if people want to get in touch with EP and look at you
Yep.
guys, they want to get in touch with you personally, where can they find it? Where's the best way?
Easiest is on the website. We have a contact us form, a chat. Both of those right now still go to me. So, but my
Okay.
email, I'll give it out as well. It's justin@executivepresence.io. I'm great on email. I'm awful on phone. I'm pretty good on LinkedIn messaging, but email is kind of my go-to communication portal of choice. And I'm pretty quick. So if you send me a note, I'll get back to you.
Fabulous.
Yep.
Justin, my man, I thank you so much. I had
Thank
such a
you.
great time today.
Me
Thank you
too. It
very
flew
much. I
by.
appreciate it. All
Yep.
right, my man. Thanks for listening today. This has been the Jeremy B. Hill Show. If you liked today's episode, go on and give us a 5-star review. Not 4, but 5. And even more importantly, share it with somebody else. This is Jeremy B. Hill. Your success is waiting for you, but it's not going to wait forever. Go get it.